Hello, Packer fans, wherever you may be. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast, getting you up to date on all things Green Bay Packers. The Packers were off today before their practice with the Seahawks tomorrow, but rest assured we've got some Packer content for you today. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our updated depth chart predictions for the Green Bay Packers going into the last preseason game. In addition to that, we're going to flash back to our week one prediction, where we take a look at player development combined with their availability for week one against the Detroit Lions. I like to refresh that on a weekly basis because there's lots of talk about injuries right now for the Packers, but the reality is most of those injuries, if it was the season, the Packers would be playing. They would find a way to get the players on to the field. So what they always say in the NFL is there's a difference between being hurt and having an injury. So after the first couple weeks of the season, everybody has aches and pains and scrapes, and they just have to battle through it. An injury is a player that is a significant medical issue that keeps you from playing. They're two totally different things. And I think what the Packers are dealing with right now, with a few exceptions, of course, like Brent Sorrell is certainly not a hurt. He has a legitimate medical injury. But a lot of the injuries that are on the Packer injury report right now is just the Packers finding ways to get the players as healthy as possible before the start of the season, because the players have had all of training camp to get ready. Some people call it minor injuries. Some people call it veteran rest. But it's all much to do about nothing. So we're going to go through my week one status report. There has been some updates, some good, some bad, as you would expect, going into the last preseason game. So we're going to take a look at those things. Just want to say a thank you to everybody that's subscribed. We're currently at 8,225 subs in only 4 months. That's phenomenal growth. We want to really say I appreciate all of the people that subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, why haven't you? Because you can come here for your daily Packer news and information. Also give us a like, because it helps us with those pesky YouTube algorithms. So let's go over to our depth chart predictions going into the final preseason game. There's a lot of training camp battles that are literally too close to call, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And we're going to make sure we go through these as much as possible and give you guys a feel for what to look for in the last preseason game. So let's go ahead and do that. I will share my screen. And here we are right now. So let's take a look at this depth chart. And what we're trying to do is talk about training camp battles and where we think everybody's going to play with being healthy. We're also going to expand this a little bit today and talk about practice squad spots, because this is all about getting down to that final 53 plus the practice squad. So we're going to start narrowing some of those players down right now. So let's start out at the cornerback position. Right now, Nate Hobbs is injured, but I feel, again, if it was the regular season, and he's said as much, he would have played through it. So we expect Nate Hobbs to be there week one. And we have Keyshawn Nixon. Now, what I'm trying to explain here in the chart here is cornerback 1 and cornerback 2 are pretty much interchangeable. Those are your outside cornerback positions. So we're going to have Nate Hobbs when he's healthy on one side. We're going to have Keyshawn Nixon on the other side. But what I think is going to happen is when we're in nickel, it is more likely that Nate Hobbs will move into the slot, and then Valentine will move into the other cornerback position. So I'm trying to highlight that here. Another thing is we might see a situation where at times Nate Hobbs will follow the opponent's best receiver because Nate Hobbs can play outside and he can play nickel. So when we have an opponent that has a high quality receiver that can play both outside and in the slot, it might make sense for Nate Hobbs to follow that receiver. So, let's look at, for example, some of the great receivers that the Lions have and the Vikings. Okay, so one of the strengths of the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings is they will take their best receiver sometimes and put them in the slot on certain downs and distances. So in that situation, it'll make sense for Nate Hobbs to travel perhaps with that best receiver because he's really good at both the nickel and the outside position, whereas Keyshawn Nixon is really transformed himself into a shutdown outside corner. He can play the slot as well, but he doesn't have the experience and expertise at the slot that Nate Hobbs has. So that's what I'm talking about here. So our cornerback number 3 off the bench will be Valentine, and he will come off the bench again, probably to take that outside spot if Nixon moves into the nickel, or if Hobbs is injured, then Valentine would be the first player off the bench, or Nixon as well. So we're going to have to see what happens with the nickel slot, which I already talked about here. They could conversely have Hobbs stay on the outside and have Bullard move into the slot. But I don't think that's the best use of their resources right now. As much as they would like to get Bullard onto the field, I think it's a classic case of putting your best players in the secondary on the field. And right now, Bullard is probably the odd man out. Valentine is playing really well. Bullard has been hit and miss in training camp. So I think the nod goes to Valentine here. This will probably be firmed up with what we see in the final preseason game. Then, of course, we have Xavier McKinney and Williams slotted in as your starters. There was discussion that Williams and Bullard were going to have a competition for that starting safety spot, but I don't think that's really developed. So right now, I think it's Williams' job for the start of the season. And for depth, we have Corey Ballantyne, Kalen King, Bullard, which we've already talked about, Bo Melton, and Adalabapo. I always mispronounce his name. Sorry about that. And Kamal Haddon. So this is the depth as I currently have it right now. But this is a moving target. So I think what the Green Bay Packers are going to do is with their depth, since they have Bullard, who can also play some corner if they need to, I think what they're going to do is they're going to take their best players, regardless of whether they play corner or safety, and try to get the best depth they can on the field. So Kamal Haddon had a very rough outing this last preseason game. So I think that knocks him out of the competition, and he might end up being a cut, or he might end up on the practice squad. That's to be determined right now. That's why I haven't put him in the practice squad slot. Now, for the practice squad, I think Mika Robinson will be kept on the practice squad. He was a 7th round draft pick. Omar Brown and Zane Anderson are also candidates to make the practice squad. Now, Omar Brown is a unique situation because I think the Green Bay Packers coaching staff really likes what Omar Brown brings to the team. He has toughness, he has playmaking ability, and I think they would like to bring him to the practice squad. And I think it actually helps the Packers that he's injured right now, because I think what they'll do is they'll just waive him. He's injured. There's a lot of teams that probably won't want to take on the injury risk of Brown, and they'll put him on the practice squad because they know what they have, and I think Omar Brown has earned a practice squad spot. So let's look at our offensive line now. We've got Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan in a left tackle competition. I'm not sure which way that's going to go right now. Personally, I would start Rasheed Walker at least week 1 against the Detroit Lions and then maybe rotate them. Because I don't know if I want to put Jordan Morgan as your starting left tackle against Detroit week 1. I believe that Jordan Morgan should be eased into the starting role if that's what they want to do. So right now, I think Rasheed Walker gets the start over Jordan Morgan at left tackle, but I think they're going to rotate, and I think Jordan Morgan is going to rotate with Rasheed Walker, but we've seen in practice that he is the next player off the bench. He's played left guard while Aaron Banks is currently injured. He's rotated into right guard. And I think in a pinch, he could go into right tackle if Zach Tom was injured. So right now, I think Jordan Morgan either wins the job at left tackle or he's your swing tackle or swing offensive lineman in general, because he can play tackle and guard, which is a really valuable thing for the Green Bay Packers to have. So I think Jordan Morgan is, at least week 1, not going to win the job. I think if I was Matt LaFleur, and thank goodness for the Packers I'm not, but if I was Matt LaFleur, I would say, you know what, I want Rasheed Walker in there week 1, and we'll rotate Jordan Morgan in. So we'll have to see what happens there. Aaron Banks currently has a back injury, and Jordan Morgan has typo. Fix that as we go here. This is a live show. So Jordan Morgan has been filling in for Aaron Banks. I think that's a situation where they'll make sure Aaron Banks is starting week 1. So I'm not worried about that. Elton Jenkins, of course, will be your center. I think Sean Ryan, because they want Jordan Morgan to play other roles, will be your starting right guard. And Zach Tom, of course, will be your right tackle. For depth, we have Jordan Morgan, of course, Anthony Belton, Monk, and Telfort. Those are my predictions for the 52-man roster. They're going to bring Walker, Morgan, Banks, Jenkins, Ryan, Tom, Belton, Monk, and Telfort. John Williams, who hasn't been able to play, I think is going to end up on your practice squad, or he might end up on injured reserve and have a redshirt year. We'll see how the Packers play that out. He has a serious back injury. He hasn't been able to practice. So I think the Packers could just put John Williams on IR, since he's not. They want to hold on to him, but he's not going to be an asset for 2025. So that's the offensive line. Let's look at wide receiver. Next, okay. We have outside starter Romeo Doubs. Outside starter Matthew Golden. No question Matthew Golden isn't a de facto starter for the Green Bay Packers right now. I think he's done enough in the preseason and in practice to show that he is too good not to be on the field. Slot, of course, will be Jaden Reed. fourth wide receiver off the bench will be Donatavian Wicks. Your joker wide receiver is going to be Savion Williams. And of course, we have Christian Watson on IR for the first 4 weeks of the season. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide receivers. Now, there is a possibility that with the injuries that are going on right now, that Malik Heath becomes a depth addition. Right now, I'm predicting that Malik Heath will be a practice squad player. Now, my main reason for feeling this way is they could put Malik Heath on the practice squad because they have Bo Melton as one of their depth players in the secondary. So if there's a situation where Savion Williams, Donatavian Wicks can't play, and they need a wide receiver out there, they can just put Bo Melton in as a depth wide receiver piece. So that's why I think Malik Heath will end up being a practice squad player or picked up by another team. All right, let's look at our linebacker predictions for the Green Bay Packers going into the final preseason game. I have Edgerrin Cooper locked in as a starter. Quay Walker locked in as a starter now that he's fully healthy. Early down back. This is a situation I want to watch in the preseason. Tyron Hopper has been making a case that he needs more playing time. So I think Tyron Hopper is eventually going to be the third down linebacker. I think Isaiah McDuffie will start out week 1 as your starter. Again, you're playing the Lions. Let's go with what we know. He's an experienced player who has experience in Jeff Hafley's defense. There's no reason that McDuffie isn't going to start week 1 unless Hopper makes so many plays in this last preseason game that they're forced to put him in. But I think by the end of the season, Tyron Hopper will be your third linebacker. McDuffie will then be your depth linebacker. And we have Colin Oliver, who's going to be on IR. I know he's technically was drafted as a defensive end, but Colin Oliver has experience at linebacker. So if he comes off of injured reserve, then I think he can be a piece that they can use as defensive end and linebacker depth. So that's a valuable commodity to have. And Isaiah Simmons and Tyron Hopper will be your depth linebackers. Christian Welch, I think the Packers would like to have on the practice squad. The challenge with that is he's been on the practice squad in the past, and other players, other teams have signed him off of our practice squad. That might happen again this year. I don't think there's a way around it. I don't think Christian Welch has enough to get on the active roster because I know they love Isaiah Simmons as a special teams player. So that's why I have him making the roster instead of Christian Welch. These could flip-flop depending on how the preseason game goes this week. So you're going to want to watch these players very closely in the preseason game. Let's get to defensive line. Defensive line is locked in right now. We have Lucas Van Ness, Donatavian Watt as the 3 technique, Kenny Clark as the nose tackle, and Rashawn Gary as your starting end for your Green Bay Packers. I want to touch quickly on Inigbare because Inigbare has played very well in training camp and in the preseason. He's been the first defensive line end off the bench, and that's important to note. Now, if Sorrell was healthy, I think there still is a legitimate case that Inigbare probably could have been traded or cut because of he doesn't have a long-term role on this roster. He's not a starter. He has a relatively high salary to be coming off the bench, but with the injury to Sorrell might end up on the IR. I'm going to have to see what happens here. Sorrell right now, if he's available week 1 or week 2, I think the Packers will keep him on the active roster because of his ability to be a valuable player off the bench. If Sorrell is going to miss 3 or 4 weeks, then I think they're going to put him on the injured reserve with the designation to return after 4 weeks. So this is in flux right now. Enigbare, right now, I predict Enigbare makes the cut, Sorrell makes the cut, Brooks makes the cut, and then after that, it's going to be really hard to figure out the depth. And the last preseason game might decide things for Corey Wooden, Cox, Mosby, Stackhouse, and Brinson. And some of these players will end up on the practice squad. So we're going to have to see what happens right now. One factor is Aaron Mosby is a key contributor on special teams where Cox does not play special teams. That might make the difference as far as who makes the active roster. So we're going to have to see what happens there. At running back, things are pretty straightforward right now. We have, assuming everybody's healthy, Josh Jacobs is our starter. Marshawn Lloyd is our change of pace back. Our blocking back is Brooks and Wilson. And for depth, we have Brooks and Wilson. Now, with Marshawn Lloyd iffy for the start of the regular season, I think they're more likely to keep Brooks and Wilson on the roster, at least for week 1. And I think Abanaconda has done enough in the preseason to be your practice squad running back. So we'll see what happens there. For quarterback, very straightforward right now. Right now, I think your starter is Jordan Love. Your backup is Malik Willis. Right now, I think Ilgersma will be your practice squad quarterback. Because what I think is going to happen here is Sean Clifford and Ilgersma are about even as far as their performance in training camp and in preseason. But Sean Clifford is a known quantity for the Packers. They know what he can do. They know what he can't do. His upside is not really a factor. Ilgersma has significant upside. Plus, he's an international player, so they get basically a free roster spot for him. So I think the nod will probably go to Ilgersma. Again, it'll come down to what happens in the preseason week 3. If Ilgersma has a great game in the preseason, he's probably your number 3 quarterback. If Ilgersma struggles and Clifford plays well, maybe they keep Clifford. It's really going to come down to the final preseason game for those 2 players. What I want to do now is I want to go to our week 1 chart, which I've been keeping. And what I want to touch on here is changes from preseason game 2 to preseason game 3 as far as availability for the regular season. So it's about development compared to last year, if they have an injury, and their status for week 1. I'm just going to go over changes because I did this just a couple weeks ago. So big note here, Marshawn Lloyd has a hamstring injury, might miss week 1. So to counter that, Wilson has been playing well in the preseason, and he's expected to be good for the start of the season. So if Marshawn Lloyd misses week 1, I'm very disappointed because I think that's a nice weapon to use against the Lions, but we're going to have to make do with what we have, right? I think the Packers have enough depth at running back to offset the fact that Marshawn Lloyd might miss week 1. Plus, it's week 1. Everybody's healthy. It's a division opponent. I expect Josh Jacobs to be in as many snaps as possible week 1 because he is an elite running back that can control the ball and run out the clock against the Detroit Lions. So Josh Jacobs is probably going to get, I would say Josh Jacobs gets 85 to 90% of snaps for week 1. Now, later on in the season, they're going to share that workload more. But against the Lions, week 1, Josh Jacobs can be a bell cow back for you. I'm not worried about that. Let's look at our wide receivers and injuries. Dobbs has a back injury. Let's just go ahead and update that right now. He's expected to be good for week 1. Jaden Reed is expected to be good for week 1. I don't think he's going to practice against the Seahawks, but I think he's going to get to the point where he can play at least limited snaps against the Lions. Donatavian Wicks has a calf strain. I think he will be good for week 1. Again, we talked about injured versus hurt. I think Wicks has a calf strain that if it was a regular season game and they needed him, he would be out there. So I'm not worried about that. Savion Williams has his shoulder injury. I expect him to be ready for week 1, but he's had so few reps in training camp and preseason that I don't expect Savion Williams to be a factor in week 1. We have Malik Heath. He likely will be on the practice squad. We also have Bo Nix as an emergency wide receiver. Mecole Hardman, I don't have making this roster, so I don't think he'll be a factor for week 1. And of course, Christian Watson will be on the PUP list for the start of the season with his ACL injury. For your offensive line, I expect all of them to be available for week 1, except for Glover, who's on injured reserve and out for the season. There's a lot of nagging injuries here, groin, back. All those issues are going to be taken care of by the start of the season, and I think everybody will be ready for week 1 for your offensive line, which is hugely important. Defensive line, all of your starters, unless there's an injury in the preseason or training camp, will be good for week 1. Brandon Sorrell might miss week 1. We'll have to see what happens with his MCL strain. Stackhouse might end up on the practice squad. We'll see what happens there. Colin Oliver is out with a hamstring. I don't expect him to be available for week 1. Your cornerbacks. Hobbs with a knee injury. Expected to be good. We've got, and that's really it. Nixon is back in practice. He'll be fine. Nate Hobbs will be ready for the start of the season. I don't expect any problems for your starters in your safety group. Let's see. Zane Anderson has a knee injury. I think he'll be to be determined. I think Omar Brown will be on the practice squad, likely to miss week 1. And that's your update on injuries. So don't worry about the injuries. I'm very, very confident that by the time week 1 rolls around, 85 to 90% of your starters will be ready for week 1 against the Detroit Lions, which is really what matters. So that's your update for the Green Bay Packers for August 20th. Tomorrow they have their inter-squad matchup against the Seahawks. We'll see what happens in practice there. I'll have your news and notes on the practice on Thursday on Friday morning. And then on Friday morning, I'll also go over what to look for in the preseason game on Saturday. Saturday is a 3 p.m. Central time game at Lambeau Field. I expect that I'm going to probably be streaming that game live with play-by-play. Obviously, I can't stream the game for you, but what I could do is I could do the play-by-play, and I can share the game cast just to keep you up to date on the game, give you my up-to-the-minute thoughts on how the game is going, reactions, Packers enthusiasm. You're going to get all that when I stream the preseason game for you live. So that's everything that's going to be happening for the rest of the week. If you haven't already done so, give us a subscribe. If you've already subscribed, give us a like for this video so the YouTube algorithms will help us grow the Pack Attack Cast family. And we'll see you tomorrow with another update on the Green Bay Packers. As always, go Pack Go!